The abbey rested in serene isolation, nestled within a lush valley surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills. The stone walls of the ancient monastery stood weathered but steadfast, their surface covered in creeping ivy that swayed gently in the morning breeze. It was a place of peace, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Here, life moved to the rhythm of prayer, contemplation, and the steady toil of hands. Brother Lucian, a young monk of barely 20 summers, awoke each morning to the sound of the abbey's bell. Its deep, resonant chime echoed through the still air, signaling the beginning of lauds, the first prayers of the day. He would rise from his humble straw mattress, wrap himself in his coarse woolen habit, and join the procession of monks making their way to the chapel. Their footsteps were soft against the stone floors, their silence broken only by the occasional rustle of fabric or the faint sigh of an early riser. The chapel, bathed in the golden glow of dawn, was a sanctuary of quiet devotion. Tall, arched windows allowed slivers of sunlight to pierce the cool dimness, illuminating the intricate carvings of saints and angels on the wooden pews. The monks' chants filled the air, their voices harmonizing in a cadence as old as the abbey itself. Lucian sang alongside his brothers, the simplicity of the melody bringing a sense of calm that seemed to seep into his very bones. After prayers, the monks dispersed to their daily tasks. For most, it was a life of repetition and routine, tending the gardens, repairing the abbey's crumbling walls, or copying texts in the scriptorium. Brother Lucian, assigned to the library, spent his days surrounded by the scent of parchment and ink. Rows of ancient tomes and scrolls filled the shelves, their spines cracked and faded by time. To Lucian, the library was a world unto itself, a place where the past whispered its secrets to those willing to listen. Yet, for all its tranquility, there was an air of mystery about the abbey. Stories of its founding were shrouded in legend, passed down in cryptic fragments. Some claimed the monks were entrusted with guarding a great secret, a relic so powerful it had been hidden away to protect it from the hands of the unworthy. Lucian had always dismissed these tales as little more than fanciful lore, yet he couldn't deny the peculiarities of the abbey. There were parts of the monastery that were off-limits to all but the most senior monks, locked doors and sealed chambers whose purpose was never explained. One evening, as Lucian worked alone in the library, the soft creak of a floorboard caught his attention. He glanced up to see Brother Matthias, one of the abbey's oldest monks, standing in the doorway. Matthias's weathered face was etched with the lines of countless years, his eyes sharp despite the stoop in his posture. "You have an inquisitive mind, Brother Lucian," Matthias said, his voice low but steady. "A good quality, though not always an easy one to bear." Lucian set down his quill, confused by the remark. "I only wish to serve the abbey, Brother Matthias," he replied, "to learn and preserve what knowledge I can." The old monk smiled faintly, a glint of something unspoken in his eyes. "Then perhaps you will find what has long been waiting to be uncovered. Remember, curiosity is a gift, but it can also be a test." Before Lucian could ask what he meant, Matthias turned and disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, leaving the young monk with a lingering sense of unease. That night, as the candles burned low and the library grew cold, Lucian's thoughts turned to the locked doors and whispered secrets of the abbey. What lay hidden within its ancient walls? And why did it feel as though he had been invited to find it? The abbey, though tranquil on the surface, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone to unravel its mysteries. And, as Lucian knelt in prayer before retiring to his cell, he couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet life was about to change forever. Chapter 1. The Whisper of Curiosity. The Abbey's library was a world of its own, a labyrinth of narrow aisles and towering shelves filled with dusty tomes, ancient scrolls, and forgotten volumes bound in cracked leather. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of parchment and beeswax, mingled with the earthy aroma of the stone walls. Brother Lucian spent much of his time here, meticulously copying texts and tending to the fragile manuscripts that told the stories of centuries past. On most days, the silence of the library was a comfort. The steady scratch of quills and the soft rustle of pages were the only sounds, a gentle symphony of purpose. But today, the quiet felt different, almost alive, as if the library itself was watching. Lucian couldn't explain it, but something in the air made his skin prickle, a whisper of curiosity tugging at the edge of his thoughts. It had started earlier that morning when Brother Matthias approached him during the midday meal. The elderly monk had placed a hand on Lucian's shoulder and spoken words that now echoed in his mind. "Seek what is buried, young one. The past has its own voice, and it waits for those willing to listen." At the time, Lucian had nodded politely, unsure of the meaning. But now, as he sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of brittle parchment, Matthias's words lingered like a seed taking root. What had the old monk meant by buried? And why had he looked at Lucian with such knowing intensity? Lucian's quill paused mid-stroke, his eyes drifting toward the far end of the library. There, beyond the neatly arranged rows of books, was a door, small and unassuming, almost hidden behind a tall shelf. He had passed it countless times without giving it much thought. The door was always locked, its rusted handle untouched. The senior monks had once told him it led to the archives, a place off-limits to novices like himself. But now, with Matthias's cryptic words stirring his curiosity, the door seemed to beckon. Rising from his seat, Lucian moved quietly toward the far corner of the library. His sandals made little sound on the cold stone floor, and his heart quickened with each step. The door loomed before him, its surface scarred by time and adorned with faded carvings of vines and symbols that seemed familiar yet unplaceable. He reached out to touch the handle, feeling the cool iron beneath his fingertips. It was locked, as he had expected. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A faint glimmer of light reflecting off a nearby shelf. His gaze landed on a book, tucked haphazardly among the others, its spine marked with strange, faded lettering. Carefully, he pulled it free and carried it back to his desk. The book was old, its leather cover cracked and brittle. Inside, the pages were filled with dense, flowing script written in a language Lucian did not recognize. But as he turned the pages, he noticed something odd. Near the back of the book, wedged between the parchment, was a small, tarnished key. His breath caught. Was this what Matthias had meant? The key felt heavy in his hand, its surface etched with faint, swirling patterns that mirrored the carvings on the door. Lucian glanced around the library, but the other monks were engrossed in their work, unaware of his discovery. The key fit perfectly. With a soft click, the lock turned, and the door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Lucian hesitated, the faint glow of his candle barely penetrating the shadows below. The air that wafted up was cool and musty, carrying the scent of forgotten things. Summoning his courage, he stepped inside, the door closing softly behind him. Each step down the stone staircase felt heavier than the last, the silence growing deeper and more oppressive. At the bottom, he found himself in a small chamber lit faintly by cracks in the stone walls. Shelves lined the room, filled with scrolls and bound volumes coated in thick layers of dust. And there, in the center of the room, was a single manuscript resting on a pedestal. Unlike the others, it was untouched by time, its leather cover pristine, and its golden lettering gleaming faintly in the dim light. Lucian's hands trembled as he approached. This was no ordinary book. Its presence filled the room with an almost sacred energy. He opened it slowly, the pages emitting a faint glow as they turned. The script was clearer than any he had seen, written in the language of the Abbey, but with a style that seemed ancient and unfamiliar. The first few lines made his breath catch. Herein lies the tale of a forgotten kingdom, and the truth of the relic that binds it to the Abbey. Let those who find these words carry their weight with faith, for they reveal a legacy hidden from the world. Lucian's pulse quickened as he read on, the story unfolding before him like a long-forgotten dream. This was the past Matthias had spoken of, a chapter of history erased from the memory of the living, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. The words glowed faintly on the page, their light reflecting in Lucian's wide eyes. He knew, deep in his heart, that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. But with this discovery came questions, and the quiet, growing certainty that his life within the Abbey would never be the same. Chapter 2. The Hidden Door. The narrow staircase behind the library door spiraled downward into a darkness that seemed to stretch infinitely. Brother Lucian descended slowly, one hand gripping the cold stone wall for balance while the other held a trembling candle. Its flickering flame cast long, wavering shadows on the ancient, worn steps. With each descent, the air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and the forgotten pages of time. At the base of the stairs, Lucian found himself in a small corridor, its walls lined with faded carvings. The intricate etchings depicted vines intertwined with symbols of the Abbey, chalices, open books, and keys. Some of the carvings glowed faintly, as though imbued with a light that had long outlasted its creators. The sight stirred something deep within Lucian, a sense of reverence and awe, as though he had stepped into a place meant only for those called by fate. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vaulted chamber, its ceiling disappearing into the shadows above. Dust hung thick in the air, glinting like tiny stars in the faint glow of his candle. Shelves filled with scrolls and manuscripts lined the room, their surfaces coated in layers of time. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a small, ornate chest. The chest's wood was dark, its surface inlaid with gold and silver patterns that shimmered faintly, as though alive with purpose. Lucian approached cautiously, his heart pounding. The chest seemed to radiate an aura of importance, an unspoken command that it must not be disturbed lightly. Kneeling before it, Lucian studied the intricate designs on its lid. Among the swirling patterns was a small lock, its shape matching the key he had discovered in the library. The young monk hesitated, the weight of his discovery pressing heavily on his mind. This was no ordinary treasure. Whatever lay within this chest had been hidden for centuries, entrusted to the Abbey's walls for reasons he could only begin to guess. Yet the key in his hand seemed to burn with anticipation, urging him forward. Lucian took a steadying breath and inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and with a soft click, the mechanism released. As he lifted the lid, the air seemed to still, as though the very chamber was holding its breath. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a bound manuscript unlike any he had ever seen. Its cover gleamed with deep emerald green leather, adorned with golden script that shimmered faintly in the dim candlelight. The words were written in the Abbey's language, but their style was archaic, belonging to a time long forgotten. Lucian's fingers brushed against the cover, and a faint warmth spread in through his hand, as though the book itself recognized him. He opened the manuscript carefully, his breath catching as the first page revealed itself. The handwriting was precise and elegant, the ink as vivid as if it had been penned only yesterday. The opening lines sent a chill down his spine. To those who find this record, within these pages lies the truth of a kingdom lost to time, its legacy entwined with the founding of this abbey. Guard these words well, for they hold the key to a destiny yet to unfold. Lucian turned the pages slowly, his candlelight revealing a story that seemed more myth than history. It spoke of a forgotten kingdom, its rulers bound by an ancient relic of immense power. This relic, described as a crystalline artifact radiating divine energy, had been entrusted to the Abbey's founders for safekeeping. The text detailed the trials faced by those who had guarded it, the sacrifices made to protect its secret, and the shadowy forces that sought to claim it for their own. The further Lucian read, the more deeply he became immersed in the tale. He lost track of time, his mind swimming with visions of long-past battles, ancient ceremonies, and the solemn vows of the monks who had dedicated their lives to protecting the relic. Yet the manuscript also hinted at something more, a secret hidden even deeper within the Abbey, a relic connected not only to the Abbey's founding but to the fate of the world itself. As Lucian closed the manuscript, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft rustling like the turning of pages in an unseen library. He looked up sharply, his candlelight flickering against the walls. The shelves around him seemed to shift imperceptibly, their shadows growing darker and deeper. A chill ran down his spine, and for a moment he thought he saw a figure standing at the edge of the chamber, watching him. But when he blinked, the figure was gone, leaving only the lingering sense that he was not alone. Lucian placed the manuscript back into the chest, his mind racing. He had uncovered something extraordinary, something that could change the way he understood the Abbey and its purpose. But with this discovery came questions, and the unsettling certainty that his actions would not go unnoticed. Carrying the chest carefully, Lucian ascended the stairs, the hidden chamber's mysteries weighing heavily on his mind. The library was quiet when he returned, its familiar walls offering little comfort. He hid the chest beneath his desk, its weight a constant reminder of the secret he now bore. As the Abbey's bell tolled for evening prayers, Lucian knelt with his brothers in the chapel. Yet his thoughts were far from the chants and psalms. The manuscript's words echoed in his mind, their meaning tantalizingly out of reach. He knew that his discovery was only the beginning, and that the secrets of the Abbey were far greater than he had ever imagined. Chapter 3. A Lost Chapter of History. As the moon rose high over the Abbey, casting its pale light through the narrow stained-glass windows, Brother Lucian returned to the manuscript he had hidden beneath his desk. The quiet of the library felt more profound now, the shadows longer and darker, as if the very air held its breath. He lit a single candle, its warm glow illuminating the ancient text before him. With a deep breath, Lucian opened the manuscript to the first page, the golden letters shimmering faintly in the flickering light. The words seemed to draw him in, as though they had been waiting for him all along. He began to read, his fingers carefully turning the fragile pages. The story unfolded like a long-forgotten dream. It spoke of a kingdom whose name had been erased from history, a land of great prosperity and wisdom, guided by a relic of unimaginable power. The relic, described as a crystalline artifact filled with divine light, was said to possess the ability to heal, protect, and illuminate the path to truth. For generations, it was the cornerstone of the kingdom's strength, guarded by an order of devoted keepers. But, as with all great power, it became a source of envy and greed. The manuscript recounted the rise of a shadowed force, an enemy that sought to claim the relic for their own. This force, unnamed in the text but described in haunting detail, was said to have corrupted the hearts of men, turning allies into betrayers and plunging the kingdom into chaos. Lucian's breath quickened as he read of the kingdom's final days. The relic's keepers, realizing they could no longer protect it from the growing darkness, entrusted it to the founders of the Abbey. The text described a secret ceremony, performed under the cover of night, in which the relic was brought to the monastery and hidden within its walls. The keepers vowed that the Abbey would become a sanctuary, a place where the relic's light would remain safe until it was needed once more. As Lucian continued to read, he came across a passage that made his heart race. The manuscript described not only the relic, but a second artifact, one that could reveal the relic's true power. This artifact, referred to as the Key of Dawn, had been hidden deep within the Abbey, its location known only to the highest-ranking monks. The text hinted that the key was necessary to awaken the relic fully, its light capable of banishing even the greatest darkness. The final pages of the manuscript were written in a different tone, almost as if they were a warning to those who might find it. The text spoke of trials that would test the faith and courage of anyone who sought the relic and its key. It warned of shadows that lingered within the Abbey, remnants of the darkness that had pursued the relic to its sanctuary. Lucian felt a chill as he read these words, the candlelight casting flickering shapes on the walls that seemed to move of their own accord. He closed the manuscript gently, its weight far greater than the leather and parchment it was made of. His thoughts swirled with questions and possibilities. Why had this history been hidden for so long? And why had it fallen to him, a young and relatively inexperienced monk, to uncover it? The sound of faint footsteps broke his reverie. Lucian's head shot up, his hand instinctively moving to shield the manuscript. The library was empty, the other monks long since retired to their cells. The footsteps grew louder, echoing softly in the stillness. Lucian rose, his heart pounding, and moved toward the sound. "Brother Lucian," a familiar voice called, low and deliberate. He turned to see Brother Matthias emerging from the shadows, his face lined with age but calm. The elder monk's eyes fell on the manuscript, and for a moment there was silence between them. "You have found it," Matthias said finally, his voice carrying both approval and gravity. "The past has chosen you to carry its weight." Lucian hesitated. This is more than I expected," he admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "Why was this hidden? Why was it forgotten?" Matthias stepped closer, his expression solemn. "Not forgotten, Brother Lucian. safeguarded. The world was not ready for the truths contained within those pages, and perhaps it still isn't. He placed a hand on Lucian's shoulder. But the Abbey does not act without purpose. If the manuscript has revealed itself to you, then perhaps the time has come. The elder monk's words both reassured and unsettled Lucian. He looked down at the manuscript, its cover gleaming faintly in the candlelight. "The Key of Dawn," he murmured. "It's real?" Matthias nodded. "As real as the relic it serves, but finding it will not be easy. The Abbey holds many secrets, and not all are eager to be uncovered." Lucian's resolve hardened. He had already stepped onto this path, and there could be no turning back. "Then I will find it," he said firmly. "Whatever trials await, I will face them." Matthias smiled faintly, his eyes filled with both pride and a trace of sorrow. "May your faith guide you, Brother Lucian, for what you seek is not only a relic of the past, but the hope of the future." As the elder monk disappeared into the shadows, Lucian sat once more before the manuscript. The Key of Dawn and the relic were no longer just stories. They were a calling. And though the weight of his discovery pressed heavily on his shoulders, Lucian knew that his journey had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Test of Faith. The following morning, Brother Lucian awoke before dawn, his thoughts still consumed by the manuscript's revelations. The Abbey's bell had yet to toll, and the quiet was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of wood and the distant rustle of leaves outside. He lay in his small cell, staring at the ceiling as the weight of his discovery pressed upon him. The Key of Dawn, if it truly existed, held the power to unlock the relic's full potential. But to seek it would mean delving into secrets long hidden, secrets that the Abbey itself seemed to guard fiercely. After morning prayers, Lucian slipped away from his duties in the library. The manuscript was carefully hidden beneath the loose floorboards of his desk, but its words echoed in his mind, compelling him forward. He retraced his steps to the hidden chamber beneath the library, the key still in his pocket, and stood once more in the quiet, dusty room. The shelves loomed around him, their shadows stretching in the faint light of his candle. The manuscript had mentioned a second hidden chamber, one that held the Key of Dawn. The descriptions were vague, filled with metaphors about light and darkness, but one phrase lingered in Lucian's thoughts. "Where the first light falls, the path will be revealed." He glanced around the room, his eyes searching for a clue. The carvings on the walls, intricate and ancient, seemed to shimmer faintly under his gaze. As he moved closer, his fingers brushing against the cool stone, he noticed something he had missed before. One of the carvings, a depiction of the sun, was different from the others. Its rays were etched deeply, and at its center was a small indentation, as if something could be pressed into it. Lucian's heart quickened. The key in his pocket suddenly felt heavier, its weight almost pulling him toward the carving. He retrieved the key and placed it into the indentation. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint click, the wall began to shift. Dust rained down as the stone slid aside, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper into the Abbey's foundations. A cold draft wafted out, carrying the scent of earth and ancient stone. Lucian hesitated, his candle flickering in the chill, but the pull of the discovery urged him forward. The passage descended steeply, the steps uneven and worn. The air grew colder with each step, and the darkness seemed almost alive, pressing against the edges of his candlelight. At the bottom, Lucian emerged into a circular chamber. The walls were covered in more carvings, their designs intricate and flowing, depicting scenes of monks holding torches and standing before a blazing sun. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, similar to the one that had held the manuscript, but this one was empty. Lucian's heart sank. Had the key already been taken? Was he too late? But then his eyes caught something, faint streaks of light filtering through a crack in the ceiling. As the sun rose above the abbey, its light began to pierce the darkness, illuminating the chamber in golden beams. The carvings on the walls seemed to come alive, their etched figures glowing faintly in the sunlight. The light struck the pedestal directly, and, as it did, a section of the stone slid open to reveal a small, ornate box. Lucian approached it cautiously, his pulse racing. The box was covered in intricate designs that mirrored those on the manuscript, and its lid was secured with a simple latch. He lifted it carefully, revealing a small object within. The key of dawn was not what Lucian had expected. It was not a traditional key, but a crystalline shard, its surface shimmering with an iridescent glow. It fit perfectly in the palm of his hand, warm to the touch despite the chill of the chamber. As he held it, a sense of calm washed over him, as though the key itself was reassuring him of his path. But before he could leave, the air in the chamber grew heavy. The warmth of the sunlight seemed to fade, replaced by a creeping chill that made Lucian's breath fog in the air. From the shadows, faint whispers began to echo. A chorus of voices, some pleading, others warning. "You are not ready," one voice hissed. "Turn back," another whispered, its tone filled with sorrow. "Faith alone will not carry you," said a third, louder than the rest. Lucian stood his ground, clutching the key tightly. "I will not turn back," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "The Abbey entrusted this secret to its keepers, and I am one of them. Whatever trials await, I will face them." The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. The chill in the air receded, and the sunlight returned, bathing the chamber in warmth once more. Lucian felt a deep sense of relief, though he knew this was only the beginning. The key had revealed itself to him, but its purpose and the relic's true power were still shrouded in mystery. As he ascended the stairs back to the library, the weight of his discovery settled over him. The key of dawn was real, and it was now in his hands. But what lay ahead would test not only his faith but his courage and resolve. The Abbey held its secrets tightly, and Lucian knew that uncovering them would come at a cost. Chapter 5. The Revelation. The Abbey was unusually quiet as Brother Lucian returned from the hidden chamber, the key of dawn safely tucked into the folds of his robe. The silence felt heavier than usual, as if the ancient stones themselves were holding their breath. Even the monks who passed him in the cloisters seemed subdued, their footsteps muffled and their gazes distant. Lucian made his way to the library, his thoughts swirling with the implications of what he had found. Seated at his desk, he retrieved the key of dawn and set it carefully beside the manuscript. The crystalline shard gleamed faintly, its light shifting subtly like the embers of a dying fire. Lucian turned to the manuscript, flipping through its pages with renewed urgency. The text had already hinted at the key's significance, but now he sought more, something that would guide him in using it. As he read, the words seemed to align with a clarity that had eluded him before. The key, the manuscript explained, was not merely an object but a conduit, a way to awaken the relic's true power. The relic's light, hidden for centuries within the Abbey's walls, was tied to the Abbey's founding purpose: to guard and preserve the balance between light and darkness in the world. But to activate this light, one would need to prove their faith, resolve, and willingness to embrace the unknown. The test was not a simple one. The manuscript described a ritual that would reveal the relic's full potential, a process that required both the key and the presence of the relic itself. But it also spoke of consequences, warnings of the power that would be unleashed, and the responsibility that would follow. Lucian felt the weight of these words deeply. This was no ordinary task. It was a calling, one that had been waiting for generations. A soft knock at the library door startled him. He turned quickly, hiding the key beneath a fold of parchment. The door creaked open to reveal Brother Matthias, his weathered face calm but watchful. He stepped inside, his gaze falling immediately on the manuscript. "You've made progress," Matthias said, his voice low. He approached the desk, his movements deliberate, and seated himself across from Lucian. "Have you found what you were seeking?" Lucian hesitated before nodding. "I found the key," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I've read about the ritual, the way to awaken the relic." Matthias studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Do you understand what this means, Brother Lucian? The relic's light is not merely a gift. It is a burden, one that has remained hidden for good reason." Lucian met the elder monk's gaze. "I understand the risk," he said firmly. "But if the Abbey's purpose is to preserve this light, then we cannot leave it dormant. The darkness outside grows stronger every day. Perhaps this is the time it was meant to be revealed." A faint smile touched Matthias's lips, though it was tinged with sadness. "You speak with the certainty of youth," he said. "But you are not wrong. Perhaps the relic chose you for this moment, just as the key did." Matthias leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The relic is in the sanctuary, beneath the altar. Few know its location, and fewer still have seen it. If you are prepared to take this step, you will need my help to access it." Lucian nodded, his resolve unwavering. "I am ready," he said. "Whatever trials lie ahead, I will face them." That night, under the cover of darkness, the two monks made their way to the sanctuary. The abbey was silent, the faint glow of the moon casting long shadows across the cloisters. Matthias led Lucian to a hidden passage behind the altar, a narrow staircase that descended into a chamber even older than the abbey itself. The air grew colder as they descended, the walls lined with ancient carvings that mirrored those in the library's hidden room. At the center of the chamber stood the relic, encased in a glass-like crystal. Its light was faint but steady, a soft golden glow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Lucian approached slowly, his breath catching at the sight. This was the relic he had read about, the artifact that had shaped the Abbey's history and held the hope of a forgotten kingdom. Matthias gestured toward the pedestal. "Place the key," he said simply. Lucian retrieved the key of dawn, its surface warm against his palm. As he placed it into a small indentation at the base of the relic, the room seemed to shift. The air grew warmer, the light brighter, and a deep hum resonated through the stone walls. The relic's glow intensified, filling the chamber with a radiant golden light that washed over Lucian like a wave of warmth and clarity. Visions flooded his mind, images of the Abbey's founding, of monks standing vigil over the relic, of battles fought to protect it. He saw the kingdom that had entrusted the relic to the Abbey, its people noble and brave, their faces filled with hope. And he saw shadows, the darkness that had pursued the relic across centuries, always seeking to claim its light. When the light receded, Lucian felt a profound stillness within himself. The relic's power had been awakened, its light restored, but the task was far from over. The visions had shown him the truth. The relic's light was a beacon, one that would draw both allies and enemies. The Abbey's purpose had never been more vital, and his role within it had only just begun. Matthias placed a hand on Lucian's shoulder. "The Abbey's light has been rekindled," he said. "But now, Brother Lucian, the true test begins." As they ascended back into the Abbey, the relic's light still lingering in his mind, Lucian felt a profound sense of purpose. The secrets of the Abbey were no longer mysteries. They were a responsibility, a calling that he would carry with him into whatever lay ahead. The days that followed Brother Lucian's awakening of the relic were marked by a quiet transformation within the Abbey. The light of the relic, though hidden from view, seemed to infuse the ancient stone walls with a renewed sense of purpose. The monks, unaware of the specifics of Lucian's discovery, carried out their daily routines with a subtle but palpable energy, as though the Abbey itself had been rejuvenated by an unseen force. For Lucian, life had changed irrevocably. The burden of what he had uncovered weighed heavily on him, but it was a weight he bore with pride and humility. The relic's light, now fully awakened, was not just a symbol of the Abbey's sacred mission. It was a call to action, a reminder that the world beyond the monastery's walls still needed its guardians. Under Brother Matthias's guidance, Lucian began the careful process of transcribing the manuscript's revelations into new texts, ensuring that the knowledge would not be lost again. Together, they crafted a plan to protect the relic and its secrets, safeguarding them for the generations of monks who would follow. The Key of Dawn was returned to its hidden chamber, its place marked with symbols only the Abbey's most trusted keepers would understand. As the seasons passed, Lucian felt himself growing into his role within the Abbey. The quiet curiosity that had once driven him now blossomed into a deeper wisdom, tempered by the trials he had faced. He became a mentor to younger monks, guiding them not only in their studies, but in understanding the importance of their shared mission. The lessons of the relic and the manuscript were woven into his teachings, their truths conveyed subtly but with conviction. The Abbey, now alive with a renewed sense of purpose, stood as a beacon of faith and knowledge, its ancient walls guarding a legacy that stretched across centuries. Though the world outside remained turbulent, filled with conflicts and uncertainties, the monks within its sanctuary found solace in their duty, knowing that their light, both literal and symbolic, continued to shine. For Lucian, the journey was far from over. The visions granted to him by the relic lingered in his mind, vivid reminders of both the light and the darkness that shaped the world. He knew that the relic's awakening was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would require vigilance, courage, and unwavering faith. As he knelt in the Abbey's chapel one quiet evening, the light of the setting sun streaming through the stained glass windows, Lucian closed his eyes and let his thoughts drift. The relic's gentle hum resonated faintly in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of the sacred duty entrusted to him. He prayed not for clarity or strength, but for the wisdom to guide the Abbey and its light through whatever trials lay ahead. And, As the evening bell tolled, signaling the end of another day, Lucian rose with a quiet smile. The secret of the Abbey was no longer a mystery, but a purpose, one that he would carry for as long as he drew breath. The Abbey's light, though hidden, would never fade, and as long as the relic remained safe, so too would the hope it represented, waiting for a world ready to embrace its truth.